Hi guys, Denise from Fascinating Cases here. The case of Amy Bradley and her strange disappearance has put me down a rabbit hole of other mysterious cruise ship disappearances. And today's case is one I've just recently heard of. It's the story of Tammy Grogan and her vanishing off the Carnival Imagination. This case is just downright weird. Investigators are firm in their belief that Tammy met a sinister fate and her own family might be involved. And we want to say that Brian Duggar from WTOL in Toledo, Ohio, did extensive reporting on this case for years. So let's get into it. Tammy Grogan was a 35-year-old divorced mother. She lived with her young son, Jimmy, who was 14 years old, and they resided in Toledo, Ohio. Tammy was very close to her mother, Bonnie, and she recently reconnected with her aunt, Deb. In 2006, Tammy worked at a dentist office. She was trying hard to make ends meet. Money was a bit tight. Tammy even had to file bankruptcy in 1994, but things were finally looking up. And Jimmy was a smart kid, a freshman in high school. He and Tammy were considered very close. At this time, Aunt Deb was hanging around a lot too, and the family was having good times together. But Deb, a woman most likely in her 50s, was always talking to a man who she used to nanny for long ago. He was 25-year-old Craig Morgan. Tammy was curious. Who are you always talking to, Aunt Deb? Why don't you invite him over sometime so we can meet him? That was mistake number one. Craig came over and pretty much never left. Craig had family money, and he was always spending lavishly on Tammy, Jimmy, and her mother Bonnie. He would pick them up in limos and brought the family lots of gifts like jewelry and watches and took them on shopping sprees. But Craig's attention really focused in on 14-year-old Jimmy. Craig gave him 23 watches, for example, a collection. Who needs that many watches? But this kind of attention was something that Tammy and Jimmy weren't used to. They didn't have money to spend on such things. But Craig and Jimmy were getting a little too touchy-feely. Remember, Craig was 25 and Jimmy was 14. One day, Tammy's father arrived at her home to find Craig and Jimmy in a snuggly, cuddly embrace. And he raised the red flag, saying, "What's going on in your home, Tammy?" Something clearly inappropriate. And Tammy agreed. She told Craig he couldn't come around anymore. It must have gotten to such a point that police were called in May of 2006. Officers paid a visit to the house. They were responding to Tammy's concern about Craig and Jimmy, but Craig said there was nothing going on between the two, and no arrest was made, and Craig did have a clean record. But still, something happened that Tammy would call police and have them come to her home. Something was going on between Jimmy and Craig that Tammy didn't like. So that was that, right? And you would think Craig would be mad and go away, but no. He continued to hang around and shower the family with gifts. And it gets weirder. You see, Aunt Deb, who was close to Craig Martin, remember, lost 100 pounds recently. And that's pretty hard to do. And Craig wanted her to celebrate. So Craig planned to send Tammy, Jimmy, Aunt Deb, and Tammy's mom, Bonnie, on an all-expense-paid cruise. To be clear, Craig would not be going. He was just sending Tammy and her family. And how could Tammy pass this up, right? She had misgivings. Her and Craig were butting heads. But a cruise is something she could never afford on her own, and everyone was so excited by the prospect of it. Tammy decided to take Craig up on his offer. Mistake number two. Tammy's sister Sherry had her misgivings as well.
Tammy was a hard-working single mom. A little bit greedy. She took a trip she knew she probably shouldn't have taken. She had suspicions about Jimmy and Craig, and she took that trip anyway.
The 4-day cruise set sail September of 2006. It left port in Miami with a stop in Key West and Playa del Carmen in Mexico. Craig arranged for Aunt Deb and Bonnie to have a big, beautiful stateroom with a balcony overlooking the water. Tammy and Jimmy would get an interior, smaller room. But once aboard, Aunt Deb insisted that Tammy and Jimmy take the stateroom. She insisted. So the family switched rooms, Here's Tammy enjoying the beautiful balcony with the beautiful view. When everyone settled in, Jimmy set off to explore the ship. When he returned to his family, he had exciting news. Of the 2,000 people on board, Jimmy ran into none other than Craig Morgan's sister, Rebecca, and her ex-boyfriend, Robbie. What were they doing there? Was that one big coincidence? Tammy thought it was odd, but soon they started to do everything together. The group ate together, they explored together, drank together, a lot of drinking. Tammy's camera had all the proof. Lots of togetherness with Rebecca and Robbie. Aunt Deb told Tammy and Jimmy, who was only 14, remember, drink as much as you want. I'll pay for it. And drinks were flowing. On September 10th, 2006, that was the last night the group was together. Photos from Tammy's camera showed a raunchy booze fest in Tammy and Jimmy's stateroom. The only one not drinking was Bonnie. She couldn't because of the medication she was taking. But partway into the night, Bonnie blacked out anyway.
Jimmy went into the bathroom while Robbie took me out on deck and filled my glass of water. And then come back, and that's the last I remember.
Bonnie woke up at noon the next day. She was in her tiny little interior room with no memory of how she got there. And sleeping late like that till noon was not usual for her. Bonnie wandered around looking for her daughter Tammy, but she was nowhere to be found. Jimmy ended up sleeping in Rebecca and Robbie's room. Bonnie asked the group where Tammy could be. They told her Tammy set out the night before in search of a man. She wanted some action. So it was thought that Tammy was maybe somewhere on the ship in a different cabin. So Tammy was not reported missing for some 32 hours later. And when she never showed up at all, Tammy was paged. But Tammy was gone. The only one who seemed besides themselves with worry was Bonnie. Jimmy was unemotional about it. If Tammy went overboard, it was somewhere between Mexico and Florida, about 400 miles of water to search. The Coast Guard put out a notice to all boats in the area to watch for Tammy overboard. There was nothing. The ship returned to Miami and everybody disembarked. Investigators questioned people present that final night in Tammy's stateroom: Jimmy, Aunt Deb, Rebecca, Robbie, and Bonnie. Some took polygraph tests with inconclusive results. Bonnie passed her test, and Aunt Deb refused to do one. Investigators caught Jimmy also in a big lie. They asked him if and when he returned to his stateroom the night before, and did he see his mother Tammy at all. Jimmy said he went into his room one time to get some swim trunks. He saw the bathroom door closed with the light on, so he assumed his mom was in there. But that account wasn't true. Because of Jimmy's electronic key card, investigators knew he entered his room numerous times. For what? We don't know. When confronted, Jimmy got nervous and he clammed up. Jimmy would return to Toledo to live with his paternal grandparents. He stopped at his and Tammy's apartment to retrieve some of his things, and that's where he found out the apartment had been robbed. Some jewelry was gone, as well as a computer and credit cards. Jimmy's grandparents said Jimmy seemed unaffected by his mother's absence, which is so odd because of how close the two were at one point. Investigators had enough evidence to search Craig Martin's home, and that's when they found some jewelry of Tammy's, but Craig said it was a gift he had given her, and she returned it after their falling out. They also found notepaper with the word Rohypnol written down, how it works, what the effects are. Rohypnol is known as the date assault drug. It will knock you out and you'll have no memory of anything. Investigators thought this was odd to find a note like that in Craig's home. Craig explained that he was researching sleep aids for his sister Rebecca because, something like Advil PM wouldn't do. Let's try Rohypnol. And you can't buy Rohypnol in the US, but you can in Mexico over the counter. And here's the connection. Investigators tested Tammy's drink glass from the group's drunken night, and it tested positive for Rohypnol. Bonnie believes she was also drugged simply to be put out of the way. Investigators believe something sinister happened to Tammy. She didn't jump overboard or go over by accident. They believe she was pushed overboard. But by exactly who, they can't prove, and they don't have enough evidence yet to take action. But they say the group on the ship that night, Aunt Deb, Jimmy, Rebecca, and Robbie, are all suspects.
I believe that something sinister befell Tammy on that trip, and that's why we are investigating it as a homicide.
Mother Bonnie is not, and she was the only one cooperating with officials. She passed away in 2012 without answers about her daughter Tammy. Aunt Deb moved away from Toledo. Rebecca and Robbie parted ways. And Jimmy? He lived with his grandparents for a bit. Then he joined the military, something he always talked about doing. But after his first break from basic training, he went AWOL and was dishonorably discharged. He went on to live with Craig Martin's mother and her husband down in Texas, meaning obviously Jimmy and Craig were clearly in touch with each other. No proof of exactly what happened on that ship, but I think people can surmise what happened. Craig wanted access to Jimmy, but Tammy stood in his way. So Craig sent someone on that cruise. He sent his sister and her ex along to oversee everything, and that's what went down, allegedly. Aunt Deb, who knows why she was in the plans. Tammy and Bonnie were drugged. Tammy was pushed overboard. Jimmy went along with it because he had been groomed by Craig Morton. None of this can be proved. It's just what I think happened. Jimmy has since lost all contact with Tammy's family and his grandparents. No one has been charged in this case. Whether we will ever find out what happened to Tammy, we don't know. She went on that cruise and she never went home. What do you think happened to Tammy? Do you think her family was involved in this? Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. I appreciate you watching, and I'll be talking to you again real soon. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Take care. Bye.